give a little thought to why we're here in the substance of our point. We emphasize the issue of community. The question we attempted to pose as poignantly as possible was, where do we go from here? Chaos or community? This is not an original thought. This is the question posed by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. himself. Most specifically brought forth in his last text issued posthumously, but he was grappling. So we seized this opportunity, 1985, to reflect on the watershed moment, one of the watershed moments in the civil rights movement, namely the Selma demonstration that ultimately led to the Voting Rights Act. And as I said in my remarks earlier, it was not simply a matter that impacted or affected southern states. The Voting Rights Act had far-reaching implications for the franchise in the state of California, as well as other states outside of the South throughout the nation. And it is not irrelevant, it is not unrelated that the Empowerment Congress is grounded in the fundamental principles that Dr. King sought to articulate, namely that the power to mobilize one's personal, that is to say, one's inner strength and resources, that is, the efficacy of nonviolence, is resident in each of us. The Empowerment Congress seeks to build on that principle. Now, the notion of empowerment itself is perhaps the latter-day conversation or discourse connected to civic engagement and empowerment related to nonviolence. So I wish for it to be clear that there's continuity. Well, Ridley-Thomas, how does this connect? I did give a brief biographical point with respect to Dr. West and my journey beginning in 1980. So this is a conversation that has taken place all that time. In other words, the relationship between the two of us predate the Empowerment Congress by a decade, by a full decade. And he has been a close observer of this experiment called the Empowerment Congress over that period of time, contributing, dialoguing with me. We've spent time in various parts of the country as well as here, thinking about what it means to improve the quality of life. We reject the notion of chaos. We seek to understand it. Our project is to build community. So some of the work that you see me engaged in on the Board of Supervisors is really connected to that frame of reference and the people that you see here. So the role of the Blue Ribbon Commission and the question of how we address child safety and protection, particularly of foster children. Why? Because they are the most vulnerable. The work that you see us seeking to do on diversion, it seeks to the dignity and worth, it speaks to the dignity and worth of every human being, not to be incarcerated unless absolutely necessary. If we add to that point of view, it is not cost effective to spend the kind of resources to incarcerate when in fact they can be made better through therapies and other interventions. We've already spoken to the issue of oversight, not a particularly revolutionary concept. Way back in the early 90s, after the civil unrest, I remember a conversation where Dr. West and I were sitting with Peter Uberoff, who headed Rebuild LA, engaged in a rather intense conversation about what do we do when people are agitated to the point that they then engage in civil unrest. And My recollection is it's hard to know whether that is criminal, carnival, recreational. What is it? We seek to build a community. Here we are again then, dealing with police violence. Ohio, Missouri, New York, in our own state. And we have an obligation to understand these issues as clearly and as forcefully as possible. The role of the Empowerment Congress is to engage in activism and as well as develop policy positions. Therefore, on the issue of the consolidation of the respective departments in the County of Los Angeles, health departments in particular, 2 years ago we issued a white paper on the issue of what mental health services should be and could be as they were integrated into the larger question of health services in the County of Los Angeles. So you are dealing with individuals, and Betsy Fromm may be here, Dr. Jack Barber may be here. These are individuals who have been leaders in that discussion. So we are activists, social service providers, policy makers, community members who are essentially trying to reduce, if not eradicate, chaos and build, nurture community. I'm going to ask that you take this opportunity to engage in dialogue with Professor West and I on a range of issues that you may want to discuss. Before doing so, I'm going to ask Professor West just to have a few remarks. Cornell?
Well, again, as I said earlier this morning, that it is a blessing to be here and to stand next to my very dear brother. I call him brother. I know he's a supervisor in the 2nd District here, Mark Ridley-Thomas. I do not know of another politician who has the courage and vision and willingness, the stick-to-itness, long distance running for justice and for freedom. So I'm very blessed to be here, and I was deeply touched by the program, and I even apologize for not going 45 or 35 minutes rather than that little 20 minutes, but the spirit of the occasion was just so sweet that I lost my sense of time. And that happens sometimes when you lose yourself into something bigger than you. And so I welcome any questions, any queries, and the wonderful folks standing on the stage, as well as the leaders who are part of the Empowerment Summit, play such an important role.
We're open to your questions at this point. Any questions? Questions. Sir, name, rank, and serial number.
David Jones, sir, writer for South LA. First, I'd like to commend you on all your accomplishments for the community. It's greatly appreciated. Definitely have not gone unnoticed. And for Dr. West, it's great seeing you. Last time I saw you was 9 years ago at Hampton University, and you still look great. So I just want to commend both of you guys on all your work. I actually just have one question for you, Supervisor. Now that the King Hospital is nearing completion, what's your next major development for your division?
Well, thanks very much. That's phase 1 on the matter of the Martin Luther King Hospital, community hospital, private, non-profit hospital on county property, raising the standard, engaged in healthcare innovations. One of the spots where we'll do electronic medicine, where in fact there will be a medical home, integrated health services. One of my deputies, the senior deputy for health, Yolanda Vera, is here. Feel free to be in conversation with her. Phase 1, we had a wonderful event yesterday, celebrate that. Phase 2 will be now, we'll study what trauma care looks like in that context. Let me just make it very clear to you. Those who say that it's not starting with trauma, you do not start a new hospital built out trauma. We'll be issuing a report that lays that out, what the process and the steps are. The notion of trauma care is the most intense portion of any hospital in terms of the 24-hour operation with anesthesiologists, surgeons, radiologists, a whole range of professionals that need to be there. We needed to get this hospital up and running to provide health care and relieve the pressure on the safety net. Now, I take the position, this comes through my own philosophical orientation, that health care is a right, not a privilege. And I take the position that in the area, the portion of LA County that suffers from the most challenging, profound, and in some ways thought to be intractable healthcare maladies, we needed to get busy, open that hospital, and then move to phase 2. And when you see it, as you did on the screen, you should go out there. I think you'll celebrate. But it's more than a hospital. It's more than an inpatient tower. It's outpatient, because we want to keep people out of the hospital. We want to promote wellness, fitness. So there's public health, the outpatient center, all these are new facilities. We're focusing on mental health, and then we are also focusing on recuperative care. That's just some of the things we're doing there. So it's more than the hospital, and I'm profoundly grateful for the opportunity to serve and help bring this to fruition. Other questions, please? And let me just add to that, in light of health reform, the ACA is going to facilitate a process where that hospital is going to be even more successful than it otherwise would have been. Why is that the case, Mr. Supervisor? It is the case because with people having the capacity to pay for, that is to say, they have their own insurance, they can shop. Contrary to those who were naysayers initially about health reform, they thought it was going to be simply government-backed health services. That's not. This is going to inspire more competition in the marketplace. So everybody has to up their game. And who will be the winners? Patients. Such will be the case at MLK as well. Question, sir.
Supervisor?
Sir.
As far as the civilian oversight, congratulations first on
Thank
having
you.
civilian oversight. What is your vision for how this applies with the new sheriff locally? And I wonder, Dr. West, if you could comment also, do you see this as something that could serve as a model that can extend out across the country with all the problems we faced in 2014?
Question is sheriff oversight. Well, we just had our first meeting yesterday to get organized, and so it's on its way now. The question will be how large, with the extent of its authority, but don't think for one moment that this is going to be a toothless entity. There's nothing more powerful in government than sunshine. The language of public policy is transparency. The more popular expression is sunshine. And when you shine a light on what's going on in constructive ways, certain things begin to happen and other things stop.
Right.
When you have citizen participation that's structured and constructive, it will make a difference. Such is the case why we have an inspector general. Such is the case is why we will then have oversight commission. And I believe that the sheriff's department will be better for it, and certainly the residents of the county of Los Angeles will be better for it. It's healthier government that's in the balance. Professor West?
I think the fundamental question in any democracy is how do you curtail the arbitrary deployment of power, especially as it relates to the most vulnerable citizens, the most vulnerable human beings in your social experiment. And I think once again here, Los Angeles and Mark Ridley-Thomas in particular is on the cutting edge of trying to ensure that there is an effective mechanism of accountability, answerability, and responsibility as it relates to our fellow citizens who are police, men and women. And I think to have that mechanism of accountability in place and people can see the ways in which it helps build community, the high quality trust that's necessary to keep this very fragile experiment in democracy called the USA alive. Because of the levels of distrust on the one hand and the levels of unbelievable inequality on the other. The two are tied together, have to be hit head on, and every generation has both raised the questions as well as in the end come up with policies, and in the end have a slice of citizens who are willing to put their lives on the line to ensure that people are treated fairly.
I do not think we should lose sight of the fact that there is a clear connection between what was seared into our consciousness in Ferguson and the discussion about democracy, specifically as it relates to the Voting Rights Act. Part of the reason things blew up like they did in Ferguson was a breakdown in responsive local government. It did not reflect in the most democratic way the composition of the community that they were policing. Served not on the city council, not on the police force, and that's some of what the Voting Rights Act was designed to do. So it's created so people have the right to vote, but you can't participate in the jury process unless you're a registered voter. We all know that. So Ferguson is kind of a textbook example of how to get it wrong. LA has to be an example of how to do it right.
That's right.
And set an example for the nation in terms of transparency, in terms of how to advance the highest and most rational levels of the democratic process. The promises of democracy remain unfulfilled, but we are engaged in the Empowerment Congress in an effort to expand the parameters of democracy and fill those gaps that we all know are very real. There is a connection in this discussion, Ferguson to LA. Therefore, we have to come to grips with chaos or community. Other questions? One more questions, ma'am.
In the past, there's been discussion on the Board of Supervisors about creating a second Latino district or possibly expanding the membership of the Board of Supervisors
Right.
to allow other groups to have an opportunity to elect representatives.
Right.
Is that discussion going?
Not sure. The chair of the Assembly Elections and Redistricting Committee, Assemblyman Ridley-Thomas, will no doubt have an opportunity to do that. The chair of the Senate Elections and Redistricting or Reapportionment Committee is Ben Allen. Both Southern California representatives in the overlapping areas on the west side. So Abby, the question is, in our last round of discussion on the issue of whether there should be a second Latino seat on the board, I think that has to do with the Voting Rights Act and its implications. Directly, MALDEF cited the Voting Rights Act as they begin to put their arguments together to sue the county. Don't lose sight of the fact that Gloria Molina got to the Board of Supervisors because of the Voting Rights Act. Somebody ought to say Selma. All right? So when you say Gloria, I say Selma. Gloria, Selma. You understand? That's the way that worked out. And same is the case in terms of those arguments still being applied today. So yes, I think a second seat. Now, interestingly enough, you'll love this. They thought the second seat would be Brother Beckwith in the second district. They thought that they were going to kind of make a move to displace yours truly. But because of a refined historical consciousness, somehow I think Cesar Chavez and Martin Luther King Jr. were communing in heaven and said, "No, we don't want that to be the case."
There you go.
So they began to look at the 4th district and the 3rd district and said there are emerging Latino populations of consequence there. And the case And those in the 4th and the 3rd said, well, look here, there are more Latinos in the 2nd district. What are you talking about? Why are you coming to the 3rd and the 4th? And the answer was, don't play us short. The Latinos in the 2nd district won't be eligible to vote in soon enough time. The Latinos in the 3rd and 4th district will be eligible to vote and qualified to vote sooner rather than later, and we want to vote sooner rather than later. We want that 2nd district, you follow me, sooner rather than later. I don't know if you all are hearing what I'm saying here. And so the immigrant population, in terms of those who are thought to be undocumented, are not those which the demographers and voting rights activists are seeking to lay claim to. They want to get this done sooner rather than later. I'm trying to say something to you, Abby. It won't be in the 2nd district necessarily. It will be where people can get to the opportunity to exercise their franchise sooner rather than later. Well, a larger board of supervisors. The people of the county of Los Angeles haven't been interested in that. And they have made it clear that as far as they're concerned, there are too many members of the Board of Supervisors already. They don't want to make it bigger. Frankly, the sentiment is that it is translated into bloated bureaucracy. You expand the board, get more government, and there is a downsizing of government mentality and sentiment that drives the perspective in terms of popular sensibilities, and therefore that's why it hasn't happened today. I have not been opposed to it. I am not opposed to it. It just doesn't seem like the voters are interested in it. And well, would you be willing to provide leadership on that front? The answer to that is I'm going to work on trying to get trauma care at MLK, and somebody else can spend their time working on that. We got to work while it is yet day. All right, one more question and we're done. Fred is stepping forward. Ma'am, then sir.
Excuse me, this is all behind the efforts of like Selma and the talk of diversity, inclusion right now in the entertainment industry, and it's a big movement. So do you think, and this is to Dr. West, do you think the word diversity is also misconstrued for the word racism as we look at the depiction of African Americans in media?
Yes, wonderful question. I've never been a promoter of the category of diversity. I think it was a bureaucratic construct that tried to create a neutral, a kind of neutered language. It has to do with vicious legacies of white supremacy, male supremacy, anti-Jewish sensibility, anti-Arab, anti-Muslim, anti-gay, anti-lesbian. I like to engage much more in a language that's more direct rather than the diversity in that broad sense. Now, at the same time, it also means that it's not a matter of demonizing any folk who are in power. It's a matter of appealing to their sense of their capacity to make choices that have something to do with what I was talking about this morning: integrity, honesty, decency, and just veracity. The truth of the matter. Qualified women, black folk, Latinos, red, Arabs, Muslims, Jews, or whatever. So, but we're stuck with the word because, you know, the corporate media likes those kind of deodorized, neutered terms. But I think it's very important to cut through them. Very, very much so. I was in San Francisco just yesterday, and Silicon Valley looks very much like the National Hockey League. How many people of color can green light a film in Hollywood? And I have nothing against hockey, but it's the National Hockey League. It's lily vanilla, lily white. And that needs to be called into question, because I do not believe that my white brothers and sisters, no matter how precious they are, have a monopoly on truth, goodness, or beauty.
That's right.
That's just a lie. It's not true. It's not true. And I think Selma's one film We've got many other talented black and brown and yellow and red artists that provide evidence that that is a lie. White supremacy is a lie.
All right, we thank you for your questions. I would simply want to conclude on the note that there's a reason the main of Cornel West, his career has been largely in the academic context, from Union Seminary to Harvard to Yale to Princeton, even flirted with coming to USC at one point in time. There's a reason that we embrace him. And over the 35-year conversation that we've had, he has engaged with his own sense of authenticity, beginning with his first text, Prophesied Deliverance, in 1982. His most recent text was issued just last week, and there'll be a signing of his book, The Radical King, here today. Let me simply say, there is a reason he does what he does, and I do what I do. Now, let me tell you about diversity. I'm going to leverage diversity to the max. You hear what I'm saying? Now, he can do what he needs to do over there at Union. I'm going to make sure that diversity becomes the order of the day in LA County. Do you hear what I'm trying to say to you? I just have to keep it plain in terms of small business, in terms of local worker hire, et cetera, et cetera. Now, Cornel and I love each other, respect each other. He's stepping on my toes when I'm trying to deal with diversity. I'm trying to get some people out here hired today on the strength of diversity. You understand what I mean? So there's a policy and intellectual construct that has political implications, and I'm going to use it. I promised him that I would serve him till I die. I'm on the battlefield for diversity. Thank you so much.
Thank you.